Okay, everybody. I have managed to keep myself completely blind on the most recent Vaush'S debate that's happened that people have been talking about. It went up just a little bit ago. Okay, it must be on the Bad Faith podcast channel. It's not on Vaush'S channel.
Force the vote, fans, and Brianna.
Ooh, there we go. All right. Yep, we're watching it. I have stayed completely blind on this debate between Vaush'S and Brianna Joy Gray, okay? For those of you guys that don't know, Vaush'S is a good fan. Yeah, Vaush'S is a fan of the stream, for those of you guys that don't know. Vaush'S, huge Xanderhall fan. He donates at least $100 a week to my stream. He's constantly in chat. If you guys don't know, we're just constantly playing VR chat together and Escape from Tarkov together. We're tight, you know? No, I'm just kidding. Me and Vaush'S are friends. We're not that tight. But Brianna Joy Gray, I do not like. I do not like Brianna Joy Gray. She got into my sort of field of view initially when she started pushing the Bernie or Bust shit back in 2019 and 2020. She started arguing that because Bernie lost the primary, that, you know, if you supported Bernie and you were a real leftist, then either voting third party or not voting at all, but certainly not voting for Biden against Trump, was the most ethically leftist thing to do. Which is really stupid, for reasons that I feel like at this point are beyond obvious. Just beyond obvious. Anyway, she's gone on a lot of different, dramas where she's just been objectively wrong. She pushed the really stupid force the vote shit that I hate. What else? She pushes for policies that are not as popular as she thinks they are. She's part of the Nazbol vortex thing. I think her co-host was like a literal Nazi. She just really overall kind of sucks, but who knows? Maybe this conversation is going to completely change my mind on her, but probably not. Probably not. Anyway, I've been putting this off for a while. I'm going to put this on 1.25 speed, and we're going to enjoy. And I'm going to eat an Oreo.
Force the vote, fans, and Brianna Joy Gray fans are fucking subhuman pieces of shit who are despicable people who are only in it for the aesthetic and for the grift. Dipshit retards like Brianna here. There are very few people on the quote left who I have less respect for than Brianna Joy Gray. What a piece of shit. I do hate her. We're never going to have her on the show. Brianna Joy Gray is a truly reprehensible person. They are spineless, grifting, weaselly, worthless little pieces. An idiot. I have no respect for Brianna Joy Gray. This is what we call a Joy Gray moment right here.
God damn. Someone needs to clip this shit and upload it on Vaush'S channel as 60 seconds of Vaush'S spitting facts.
No matter what she personally believes, she covers for fascists. She's representative of the rot in the online left, unworthy of the platforms that they stumbled into through the charity of people smarter than them. They're genuine.
I'm just gonna let you all know, Vaush'S is based and correct on most issues, I find. So, Brianna Joy Gray loading this, front loading this discussion or this debate with these clips literally only reinforces how sure I am that Brianna Joy Gray is a dishonest piece of shit. Because for there to been this many instances of Vaush'S insulting her like this, even if we don't remember all of the different instances, it reminds us, man, she must really suck.
Unhinged person. She'll never have me on. You'll never have me on, will you, Brianna? You know that wouldn't go well for you.
Oh.
I'm excited to be joined today on Bad Faith Podcast
Oh.
for the first time by prolific Twitch streamer turned YouTube streamer. Vaush'S, welcome to the program.
Hello, what a pleasure to be here.
That was a dig! That was a dig! Did you guys catch that? Did you guys catch that dig? Who caught that dig she just did? Never forget.
This fine morning.
I am doing well. Look, so the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because I had the pleasure of meeting you for the first time.
She said Twitch streamer turned YouTube streamer. He became a YouTube streamer because of the event.
On Rising last week. We were brought on, the producers reached out to you to come and talk about some of the discourse that's been going around about Andrew Tate and this crisis of masculinity that seems to have been an ongoing problem and trend for some years now. The rise of popular internet figures like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate as reflective of some deficit in society more broadly that is leading to both these YouTube figures and also a lot of kind of dangerous.
I love when people who, literally Andrew Tate and everyone who dick rides Andrew Tate use the popularity of Andrew Tate as justification for the popularity of Andrew Tate. It's like, oh, well, Andrew Tate wouldn't be so popular if he weren't right about the state of conditions people are living in. He wouldn't be so popular if he didn't have a point. It's literally the Sneeko argument.
Socially maladaptive behavior offline, I would say, and whether or not the left has met the moment in the same way that the right has in terms of offering an off-ramp to people who feel perhaps isolated, disillusioned by society, etc. And what people noted after our interview was that there had been this history of you having had some substantive criticisms of me online, and it felt odd to folks that we had never actually talked about it before we were kind of in this public setting, talking very cordially. Joining us now to discuss is YouTuber Vaush. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be here. How y'all doing?
We're doing all right. And I was impressed by your professionalism and decorum in that context, and I thought that you might be a good person.
She really talks for a long time, doesn't she? I'm going to go ahead and turn it up to 1.5 speed. Hopefully you guys can handle it. If you can't, you might want to do some cocaine or meth. It'll help you keep up.
Actually, to have it out with and discuss some of our substantive disagreements.
Adderall
and
may
also
work
anything
too.
else you want to talk about today. How does that sound?
Oh, sure. Look, I love arguing with folks, but the masculinity, Andrew.
I'm going to have to use some weed because my brain works so fast I have to slow it down for me to understand a video going so slow as like 1.5x speed.
Tape business. It's pretty serious. I think it's important to take the opportunities you can to talk about it. Plus, it's just no fun in getting off in the head every time you're, in the same Zoom call with someone just because you've argued online. If folks did that, there'd be no way for anyone to do any kind of collaboration the way things are these days.
I will say, it is, Brianna Joy Gray is very fake. It is always very tough to balance when you deal with someone as dishonest and as massive of a piece of shit as Brianna Joy Gray online, and you're like dealing with her, talking to her, responding to her, whatever it may be, right? You're obviously going to get very like angry and you're going to throw insults because Brianna Joy Gray is a dishonest figure as far as I'm concerned. And that's frustrating. Nothing is more frustrating than me, or to me, than someone who is just being dishonest and people are falling for it. It's really frustrating to me. It grinds my gears. So Brianna Joy Gray, like, in this case, Vaush is like shit-talked her very vitriolically with like insults and whatnot on a show, but you have to balance the level of like adult professionalism and decorum you have to maintain in a one-on-one face-to-face video call conversation while also maintaining that you still feel this way. This was not just you expressing takes that you're too afraid to say when the person's actually in the room. You're just being polite right now, but if things get to that point, you're willing to behave the same way, as you did when they weren't there as when they are there, which makes you look consistent, not like, snaky or whatever. I don't think Vaush is snaky, but I think the point of the well poisoning that Brianna did at the beginning of this was to try to make it look that way.
I agree. And Vaush, I gotta say, I don't see us as having really argued.
Like, what? Why would Vaush be so, polite and well-mannered in this conversation when he was so mean on his show? How dishonest. What a snake.
Online. I have, become aware over the years of a number of, critical videos you've done about me. You, I believe, took offense to a radar that I did about defunding the FBI.
No matter what she personally believes, she covers for fascists.
We were on opposite sides of the force the vote conversation.
The specific force the vote movement was one of the most blatant grifts that got passed as left-leaning activism in the past several years.
And I'm sure there's been some other things over the years, but
yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. What would you describe as
true.
your kind of substantive disagreement with me and my political approach?
Oh, I wish I'd written a list. I've got such a bad memory. Look, the gist of it is this. And, we're all, not everyone's going to agree on every part of this. Some disagreement is natural. But I've noticed a tendency across the left where, as a reaction to the idea that softness and identity politics has in some way weakened the left's movement, the left coalition, I see some people who are moving towards this, the right and the left both have the same fundamentally, valid critique of society, which is to say that there are elites in charge who have an undue and inordinate amount of power, and that the best way to challenge those systems is with kind of like a radical populist movement that is left-leaning but can reach out to the right. Principally, I don't disagree with this. It's definitely possible to take right populism against
the idea
economic
sounds
elites
nice
and turn in the right direction. Sometimes they're just mad about Jews.
In action, though, it tends to, come out as Nazbol shit. Utilizing both the plight and the things that both the right and the left care about. except for the few select issues the right claims to care about that are real issues, you're just going to end up having Nazbol shit. And Nazbol shit is just like, oh, you have some good points about economics. Oh, only for white people, I guess. Okay. Ooh. And it's weird because I don't think that's really where Brianna Joy Gray argues from. I mean, she is like Nazbol adjacent, but she is, I would argue, overall a class reductionist. Like, that is what she is. Above all, she believes that the working class, period, is the most oppressed demographic in society and the one that needs to be fought for and advocated for the most. Any other subcategory of the working class isn't worth focusing on. Now, here's the real issue, is that these same figures will basically use this logic to also extend to these, like, minority groups, right? They see focusing on LGBTQ rights as a waste of time, because guess who else is also LGBT? Gay people. Or not gay people. Well, yeah, gay people are LGBT. Rich people. There are rich LGBT people. There are rich black people. There are rich people of all sorts of minority groups the left advocates for in a more social, like civil rights level, right? And so a lot of these discussions they see as a distraction from the real discussion of the fact that they think that all we need to be talking about is how the ruling class is fucking over the working class. And if we focus the conversation on civil rights stuff about, like, the rights of black people and gay people, etc., then that is also advocating for some wealthy capitalists as well and what they believe in. And so you basically get a woke-sounding version of the go woke, go broke, gay agenda argument you hear from the right. You know what I mean? That is where I think Brianna Joy Gray is and where I think her problem lies. Does that make sense, you guys? They're convinced that advocating for these marginalized groups basically just benefits the ruling class and takes attention away from the true victims of all the bad stuff, which is just the working class, period. Yeah.
Really a coin flip on that one. Notice sometimes this discourse.
And to be clear, I don't entirely disagree with that. I believe in intersectionality for a reason. I believe very critically that the ruling class, which is mostly made up of those that hate the marginalized groups that, we advocate for here on the left, they use economic and class disparity as a way of oppressing these marginalized groups the vast majority of the time. The vast majority of black Americans are not living under laws that say they are less of a person than a white person. They are actively being discriminated against and have been for a long time on an economic level, which has allowed them to live, which has not allowed them, forced them for a large part to live in poverty with much less access to ways out of that situation. And that is the way that they have been oppressed a lot in modern day. So yes, it is a class issue, but it is very much also a social issue.
Course, sort of spirals off and sends people in a bad direction. I've criticized Jimmy
class
Dore
issues are social issues, but you know what I mean.
Poster children, this particular movement, to the point now where he's just a Republican, indistinguishable in every way. If I had any criticisms of your takes,
yeah, clip that. Homosexuals are gay.
I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, right? This tendency, this line that's been drawn.
Yeah, I've heard people make that criticism, but I'm often confused as to why people make that criticism of me. So, for example, I know that you did an extended video on my Marjorie Taylor Greene is right radar, right? Which was an argument attempting to, with a provocative title and framing, say, hey, conservatives, not conservative leadership, I want to make sure that we make a distinction between, we're talking about Republicans or conservative voters versus Republican or conservative politicos who I think are often acting in bad faith, whereas some voters have a good faith interest in a lot of these issues where there's over.
Has Brianna Joy Gray, gotten better? Does she still associate with the neo-Nazi dude that she ran a show with? I remember she had a neo-Nazi that she ran a show with at one point.
Overlap between the left and the right, but are being drawn to the right.
Oh yeah, where's Virgil Texas? Because after that, she ran a show with Virgil Texas, who's currently disappeared from the internet following credible allegations of grooming.
I don't see space for it on the left. I just want to be clear. I'm not giving any credence to what Marjorie Taylor Greene as a person is saying. But in the context of that radar, I'm saying, okay, let's.
I wish Vaush'S just started this by asking, "Where's Virgil?" Imagine if just after her long screed, he just replied, "Where's Virgil?" And that was it. And just didn't leave the topic of Virgil the entire conversation. And he recorded it on his end. and upload it on YouTube. That would go hard.
Let's acknowledge that for once, the right is adopting a position that has long belonged to the left, that these deep state institutions have historically over-targeted the left and progressive movements.
No, Vaush'S is bored right now. I can see it in his eyes. He wants to be playing a video game right now.
Whether it's the Black Panthers, whether it's communist and socialist movements in the first half of this century. And let's make sure that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is not a good faith actor, who is buffoonish in her takes and in her politics and in her behavior, let's not let her be the one that owns the space. Let's use this opportunity, this opening that Republicans have set up to actually advocate for the kind of reforms to these institutions that the left has always wanted to have. Let's take this moment and write it in our own image instead of completely abdicating our voice in this space. And I was really clear in that radar. I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. What she's fighting for is stupid. She just wants to insulate Donald Trump. I say all of these things repeatedly. I say repeatedly that the right is not the answer, that people should not vote Republican, that I vote independent, that I would never vote Republican. And yet, despite what I feel to be, an almost exhausting level of caveating, inevitably there's someone who pipes up and says, oh, Brianna Joy Gray is running cover for Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think I called her, I forget what epithet I called her in the course of the radar, but it wasn't nice.
Slur, no doubt.
LOL. But you know what I mean, Vaush. So what do you say to that?
Well, I remember that. This was the...
She's so like condescending. She's a good speaker because she's fast at talking. I mean, I do have her sped up, but she's fairly fast at talking, and she doesn't say like too much, and she doesn't really pause too often between speaking. She's clearly had a lot of experience speaking to an audience, so she's a good speaker. But God, does she drone on for a long time, and God, could she be boring.
The FBI discourse. It just, in the terms of Marjorie Taylor Greene and the, broken clock being right twice a day thing, it reminds me a little bit of like a Holocaust denier who, will briefly acknowledge the existence of the Holocaust only when comparing it to, COVID lockdowns or something, right? Very marginal, very narrow.
He's completely right. Not Marjorie Taylor Greene. Brianna Joy Gray is absolutely one of those people who is willing to acknowledge certain issues exist when it benefits the narrative that she wants to push. But when the left, usually she's arguing against the left, ironically, when the left has a position that she disagrees with, it's like all in. She disagrees with that position that she once totally agreed with, that idea or that problem. She totally agreed exists if it benefited the narrative the right was pushing. If it's a narrative the left is pushing that she disagrees with, that problem no longer exists. And there are a few examples where she's just that contradictory of like descriptive statements she'll make about the world.
I'm going to take the correct sort of framing on an issue for just a second, so it allows me to take, an awful take. Because I don't think, and you've said this, right? I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene really has an issue with the oh my goodness, sorry, it's so early. The FBI or institutional power. It's really just a matter of where it's being used. And I'm kind of curious about the way it's, kind of taken shape in this discourse too, because I don't really have an issue with the way the FBI has been behaving with regards to like the raid on Mar-a-Lago or any of the recent investigation stuff since the Trump administration. I mean, it's still the FBI, right? Not exactly an ally of the left, but broadly as an institution of the state,
Yeah, Brianna Joy Gray likes to come out in defense of conservatives when, like, institutions the left tends not to like go after them. It's like, why does Brianna go after the FBI when it finally has a broken clock right twice a day moment, Like, of all times to go after the FBI, why is it when they raid Donald Trump? The
feds. They're doing, it seems, a relatively upstanding job, certainly compared to what they've done in the past. And I worry about fomenting any kind of opposition to them now in the context of how the right sees them as being... I'm
going to be honest, I'm still not a fan of forward-facing Vaush. I really do miss the angle. Like, look at my stream. I think this is the perfect angle. A small, slight variation on, like, facing away from the camera. Like, obviously, like this wouldn't be ideal. Like a full-on side profile like Vaush used to have, not ideal. But I think every streamer looks best with this angle. Because, like, you feel you're right next to me. You feel you're sitting in a chair right here, like at the side of the table, sitting next to me as I look at what I'm watching, That's the vibe I want to give you guys. That's the angle I've given you guys.
Well... if you accept the FBI as bad broadly, you're kind of giving leeway to the right there to make invalid criticisms against their behavior when they're targeting legitimately stuff they've done.
Yeah, we chill.
I think that's a perfectly legitimate argument, which is why, literally in the context of that radar, I said part of the issue is that elites want to change institutions when they start to hold elites accountable. And that historically, the FBI and these kinds of deep state, for lack of a better word, institutions have been used to run cover for elites. And that's exactly what's happening right now. So regardless of how you feel about Mar-a-Lago, whether that's
God, I hate the term deep state. Like, I hate how much conservatives and right-wing conspiracy theorists have fucked up the ability to be a based anti-government guy, you know? Like, I won't spoil the new Last of Us, but Bill from The Last of Us is like a real libertarian. That is what real libertarianism, anti-government looks like. And goddamn, am I mad that the right, not neo-Nazis, whatever, and whatever, have basically co-opted the right libertarian label as a way of defending themselves against, you know, basically just being labeled as what they are, right? If you're a libertarian, if you've legit got the don't tread on me flag and you fucking hate the government and you hate, like, you're a big fan of private property and you just don't want the government up in your shit and you don't trust the government and that's your whole thing, you should be pissed about these fasci Nazi authoritarian motherfuckers trying to co-opt your label. Like, even you lefties in chat don't like right-wing libertarians, I've met and seen some based left-wing or right-wing libertarians, and calling them right-wing libertarian is, like, certainly, like, a stretch, because most of these people have very left-wing social beliefs. They're just all about little, like, small government, and I don't agree with them, but they're not bad people. They're legitimately not bad people. Unfortunately, most people who call themselves libertarians now tend to just be fascies.
It was a political raid, and of course, there's all this stuff going on now with Biden and whether or not he's being treated similarly or differently, and that's a whole other quagmire. But regardless of whether you feel like Trump is being unfairly persecuted by the FBI or not, the left knows how it feels about the FBI. And why not let the left make its claims about how the FBI should be reformed in a progressive way? If you have concerns about the right only using this issue of FBI reform as a way to implement quagmire. I find that a lot of conservatives in the rising audience, for instance, are very hostile to
For those that don't know, a quagmire is like a bog.
The idea that a powerful institution would be weaponized to defend the rich but attack the poor, or even attack the left and attack the otherwise marginal. And they are open to that argument. And they, in fact, were very receptive to that argument in the comments of that video and elsewhere online. And so, again, I wonder what you make of that. I feel like that's a legitimate point that you made and one that I addressed in the context of the radar. So why the kind of hostility about the radar in particular?
Well, because of the framing, which, to be fair, you kind of did right there, right? The Mar-a-Lago thing and the Biden thing ain't really comparable. The raid on Mar-a-Lago was because Trump had failed to comply with pre-existing demands to turn over the material.
I like Vaush'S slight code switching there. He said, like, I saw the clip. Destiny posted the clip, not slowed to like a normal speed. Can we get that? Can we get that? This is how I talk after 5 minutes of playing Red Dead Redemption 2.
Why the kind of hostility about the radar in particular?
Well, because of the framing, which, to be fair, you kind of did right there, right? The Mar-a-Lago thing and the Biden thing ain't really comparable. The raid on Mar-a-Lago was because Trump had failed to comply with pre-existing...
I love that. I fucking love that. He did a little southern accent there. Kanye does that voice randomly all the time. It's hilarious. Dude, I'm not even joking. If you've grown up around southern accents or recently watched media with southern accents, particularly me because I grew up like in the South, it fucking hits you out of nowhere. And I love how funny it is because it looks like Vaush'S code switching into like a black scent, I guess, in this conversation, which is just it's just a funny clip. I will say it's really funny. It is good. It's really funny.
Demands to turn over the material. Seems like Biden just, dropped spaghetti out of his pockets and left a bunch of documents everywhere. Stupid, no defending it, but not really federal raid territory.
No, I don't think they're comparable, and that's why...
When you realize that, like, what many people call, like, a black scent and a southern accent sound very similar.
Biden wasn't raided. I do think that because Biden took the position when the Trump documents were outstanding, that it was deeply irresponsible for a president to have been in this position, that I think he said something like, no one should ever be president who is so irresponsible with documents, and now here he is, obviously in the exact same situation. So I do think Biden set himself up for a number of comparisons and claims being made about his fitness because of overreaching with the Trump argument.
However, I totally get it. I'll tell you a secret. I voted for Bernie during the primaries, not Biden.
Yeah, I'm aware, but you did vote for Joe Biden during the general election, and you advocated for people to do so, which is perfectly fine. But I do believe that's another point of contention that you've had with me, that you...
Here's a juicy one. I really wish that we'd seen Donald Trump. I wish that Donald Trump's big anti-trans, like anti-LGBT speech that we just covered had come out like before this talk, because the Bernie or Busters really have no ground to stand on saying there is no difference between a Biden and a Trump presidency after that fucking speech.
You disagreed with my hesitation to endorse Biden so quickly and my demand that the left hold out, and including Bernie, hold out a little longer in the endorsement process until he got something more in the line of concrete concessions from Joe Biden.
Yeah, I'm happy to hit to that. But with regards to the document thing, you said that the question, he went so hard on the Mar-a-Lago raid thing, Biden, and then it turns out, he's got these docs around. I agree, this is a political, falter on his part for sure. It doesn't really speak to the FBI though. I wanted to ask though, specifically, because when the cons are talking about the FBI, they're usually criticizing them for behavior I think is just and warranted, like the Mueller investigation, for all the fun and fireworks that turned out to be. In principle, I get it, much in the same way that the whole Russiagate business ended up turning up some pretty interesting info, indictments and knowledge, and how the Russian government was making a cat run out of there. Silly. The Russian government was making a good effort to, lean on the scales whoever they could. It seems like, at least at the moment, I don't really know what you mean when you say reforms to the FBI. What does that mean? Because when MTG says it, she means, like, don't go after cons ever. So, like, what reform are we, like, looking for here?
Well, to be frank, what MTG was advocating for was abolishing the FBI. That's what was trending. That's the phraseology that people were using, abolish the FBI. And I'm of the mind that given the historical, I believe in the radar, I mentioned that 85%, I think it was, of all FBI investigations, wiretapping, assassinations, all of the things that it's done, have targeted the left. So on balance, do I care about the Mueller investigation or a raid in Mar-a-Lago as compared to the murder of civil rights leaders and the wiretapping of everybody from Martin Luther King to Elvis? No, I would happily abolish the FBI. So that's top level. If people are making that argument, even if it means incidentally that there are some, let's say, legitimate investigations that don't occur, I personally, on balance, would be happy with that compromise. So that's not a compromise that needs to be made. Any number of institutions exist to investigate errant presidents and the like. The DOJ can continue to exist. This argument is often brought up in the context of, like, let's say, abolish ICE or abolish the police. Abolish the NSA. There have been institutions that have accommodated the needs of those institutions before those relatively newer versions existed. And I don't think that simply asking for substantive reform or abolishment of one institution means that everyone else gets off the hook, which is, again, why I made it clear in my radar.
She's so condescending and slimy. The whole thing, her whole meme during the general election after Bernie lost the primaries was telling her audience, basically signaling to her audience that she is a morally superior lefty because she is not going to vote for Biden, because she refuses to compromise on her leftist principles by supporting a liberal. Even if supporting that liberal prevents a fascist from taking power, a fascist who, upon losing said election, incited a violent coup on the Capitol.
That advocating for systemic reform for the purpose of insulating elites against criticism is absolutely the opposite of what we should do. But we should be cognizant of the fact that these institutions are designed and are put in place to do the exact opposite, to protect elites and target people who are marginalized politically or otherwise. And if the right wants to kind of step in it by popularizing the idea of abolish the FBI, and if that movement's going to have some kind of legs, rhetorically or otherwise, if there's going to be a moment for that, why not have people who are much more knowledgeable than I, frankly, design the kinds of reforms that they think would actually be beneficial to the left? And I had some people on the podcast to try to talk about what those reforms would actually be. I think it was Alex Vitale, and then I think I spoke to also Cornel West shortly after to try to pin them on what they would advocate for in terms of substantive reforms to the FBI and whether they thought that this was a moment that the left should be pushing. And while I think that Cornel West did agree that this was something that we could.
Okay. Is it just a type of grift to develop a skill at speaking really fast with a lot of words and keywords that don't really mean anything at the end of the day? Like, I feel like I can usually get my thoughts across in 6 sentences. If I wrote out my take on any given topic, I feel like I can fit it into a reasonably sized paragraph. I don't think she could. I genuinely don't think she could put her position on most of these issues in a reasonably sized paragraph because there's so many loop arounds and back and forths. I guess as people listen to this and think she's smart,
politicize and take over if we wanted to. I think very few people were willing, or maybe just hadn't put enough thought in it because it's a new moment, into what constructively, or concretely rather, that would look like. But I think it's a conversation the left should be having, right? That's a conversation go ahead.
That's my issue, right? Alex and Cornell aren't the people with their hands on the levers. The right is, or at least potentially could be.
Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean that right now, we talk about material conditions. The historical context of this discussion, abolish the FBI, this is not one in which we're having a level-minded conversation about the exact ways in which to reform the institution.
I agree, but that's exactly what I'm pushing for.
No, well, but hold on. But it ain't happening.
Right, but why isn't it happening, Vaush?
Well, this is the same issue I had with endorsing Biden. There isn't a third option.
I love Vaush. He's a good friend. I love him.
You've got exactly 2 in this case.
Well, there was a third option, and I know that because I voted for the third option.
Well, no, yes. in the general election, not the primary.
Yeah, no, in the general election, I voted third party.
Right, like I said, there were 2 options.
Just the fact that she chose to vote third party in the general election between Biden and Trump, that alone is like a moral tell. You know what I mean? It's a tell of who she is as a person, what her priorities are, what she cares about, what she sees as a real issue, and what she doesn't see as a real issue. It's a straight up fucking tell.
Two options that can happen. Well, hold on. You know, I've never really given a damn about, you know, well, here's a educate.
You know, there is nothing more leftist than throwing your vote into a flaming dumpster.
That perfectly represents my virtues or whatever. You know, you've got what you've got. In the case of the FBI,
well, just to be clear, I didn't vote third party because it represents my virtues. I represent third party because, practically speaking, if third parties get, I believe, to 55% of the vote percentage, they get additional funding. It makes it more possible for a third party to get ballot access and to be an actual contender and change.
No, you dumb little content creator. Well, yes, it is true that the higher percentage of the ballot that votes for a third party, the higher the chance there is for them to have the funding to be able to get, you know, a bigger figure in the mainstream. That is not an excuse for betting on that over a literal fascist that could take power, right? And who incited a coup, an attempted coup, a violent attempted coup, when he lost, okay? This just ages poorly. Not to mention, by the way, that unfortunately, it's just every political strategist worth their salt agrees that we effectively live in a two-party system. Every vote for a third party is effectively a thrown-away vote. That's just how it is. The best thing we can do, the best change that can be implemented to make third parties viable is, guess what? Guess what it is, chat? Ranked choice voting. That's it. Ranked choice voting. And there you go. Third parties would be viable as fuck day one. People wouldn't be afraid to vote third party anymore. They'd be far less scared to vote third party because they can make their second choice. If their main vote fails, they can make their second choice Democrat or Republican, whatever they prefer. It'll make people who've otherwise had to go Democrat or Republican open to be able to vote for a third party that better represents their ideas, which is definitely going to get third parties higher ballot, like higher amounts of votes, like a higher percentage of the vote. 100%. At least double it. It would at least double it.
That oppressive two-party duopoly reality that we live under today. It's a real thing that could happen if enough people actually do, in fact, vote third party.
I can, and I'm happy to support third
in a way
parties
that throwing my vote away for Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. is actually doing nothing with my vote. So we're talking about political pragmatism.
He became president.
Right, with or without my vote in Washington, D.C., not even a state. That
Biden's actually done a fair amount of stuff. I don't have, like, on hand every single accomplishment he's made so far, but Biden's actually been pretty productive as a progressive, as a left-leaning president. He's done some pretty good shit.
That is the most effective way for me to actually politically represent my interests.
My point here ain't about criticizing your vote. It's that only two people were going to be president, and there are only two real.
I need to get this man to play Red Dead Redemption 2. Should I gift Vaush'S Red Dead Redemption 2 on Steam right now? I feel like I should do that as a gift for this, as like a present, as like a payment for this gift. Maybe he'll stream it. Do you guys want to see if he'll cry? Actually, no, he hasn't streamed God of War 2018, okay? I gifted him God of War 2018 as a Christmas present, all right? And the motherfucker still hasn't streamed it, all right? You guys need to bully him into streaming the game. It is literally the perfect stream game. It's like Dark Souls in the way that it plays, with occasional cutscenes and dialogue. And there's absolutely plenty of... Just trust me. You got to get him to play it. It would be one of his best game playthroughs, okay? He's been looking for a game that people actually want to see him play, because all the shit he's been playing lately is, like, indie games that are kind of obscure that people aren't really down to watch as much. So he needs to play God of War 2018 on stream. I'm telling you guys. You got to get him to do it. He will not regret it.
paths, the FBI.
No. But those are two different. But Vaush, I want to be really clear here. You said there were two options. You didn't say at first there's two options for what a presidential outcome was going to be. But my vote is not connected to what I want the presidential outcome to be. There are other political realities that my.
Oh, he's doing narrative games now? Hell yeah, he better do God of War pretty soon. I want to see him play through it. I gifted him that game for Christmas.
Vote can determine. And it's the same thing with this FBI stuff. I would have loved a world, Vaush, where you and I were having a conversation about, gosh, I know the FBI has done a lot of messed up stuff. And if there's an opening here for the elected representatives to be a part of drafting what new legislation would look like to reform the FBI, we should be pushing for that and making sure that it's written in our image, not a right-winger's image. But instead, now you and I are back and forth on the internet, or at least you are criticizing me on the internet for even wanting to reform the FBI, which seems to me should be a pretty obvious bedrock.
Abolish.
I would also abolish the FBI, which should be a bedrock non.
For the record, by the way, honestly, I hate the CIA more than I hate the FBI is responsible for they went after MLK. The CIA is like, they do all the fucked up shit abroad, but the FBI does all the fucked up shit here. Which I don't know. I feel, yeah, like the CIA literally is responsible, directly and by extent, if you really want to follow the path of destruction, for the deaths, rapes, murders, enslavement, genocide, poverty, and exploitation of millions of people in Central and South America, and even in other continents.
Easy principle for left people to adopt.
I don't think so at all. I think federal police are a fairly necessary institutional force, much in the same way that in our current system we need, municipal police. Though obviously they are a largely harmful institution. You just can't open them.
Then again, the FBI also invented crack cocaine and distributed it to the black community in America, so that they could push the drug war and target it specifically at black Americans without it being on paper targeting black people. Fuck, we're really picking between a rock and a spiky sea urchin, huh?
Abolish them. You need to take the work to put in systems that support the same basic functions and practices.
Vaush, was your response to me that, well, I think that Brianna's going too far in saying that we should.
Well, I haven't gotten to my point yet because we keep getting edge cased here. The issue I have, and we don't need to make no analogies to Biden or Trump or whatever. The issue here is that in this historical context, there are only, regardless of whatever paths you support, broadly or in the long term, there are two attitudes that are institutionally supported towards the FBI. One of which is the standard boilerplate, let them do what they do, Democrats, whatever, moderates, and then the Republicans who want to abolish it. The issue that I have here is that the desire. Well, that's true. There's wait, please. There's no institutional support for moderate reform. There are politicians who don't want to touch the FBI.
That's a tautology.
And politicians who want to abolish it.
You are framing the argument in a limited way. You are defining two choices.
The world
and then saying,
is limited.
No. You're defining two choices and then saying there's two choices. There is in fact a world where our job on the left, I believe, is to create additional choices, not to sit around in this doomer. Wait a minute.
Not to sit around in
this doomer zone saying, well, we can't do anything, so let's.
It's not okay. He's not wrong. It ain't doomer. The being a realist about the state of American politics and pointing out that wasting your vote on a third party when there is a literal fascist who is one of the two options that is realistically going to get elected, these are very, come on. Yeah, she...
He'd be angry. Vaush, you call me a subhuman something?
Yeah.
Fascist or something.
Force the Vote fans and Brianna Joy Gray fans are fucking subhuman pieces of shit who are despicable people who are only in it for the aesthetic and for the grift. You wrote down mine.
Yes, they are. Being I really do feel like someone who I know is as smart as Brianna Joy Gray, and do not get me wrong, Brianna Joy Gray is definitely intelligent. Okay, she is not a dumb bimbo. All right, she is definitely intelligent. She has the political experience, the knowledge, the intelligence, all of these things all come together. There is no excuse for her to hold the positions that she does unless it is literally her just trying to represent a more LARPy, anti-establishment picture of herself that LARPy, anti-establishment lefties can rally behind. It is a somewhat effective grift as far as grifts that are on the left go. There are not many grifts on the left that work, but this one is one of the few that does.
But I didn't write anything down. Come on, no fair.
Well, I've never mentioned you in public, Vaush. I've never said anything about you in my entire life.
That's fine. We're both public figures, and we have the right to take shots at each other at our will. But I ain't got.
But there is no this other because I haven't. But I just want to make sure you were saying right now that there are two options. I want to be really clear. I don't disagree with you when you say there is no movement on the left to abolish the FBI. In fact, that is the sum total of my criticism. Why is there no movement on the left to abolish or at least reform the FBI? Why is Marjorie Taylor Greene in the context of a self-interested campaign to protect Donald Trump?
What? I don't know. So this is a really good example of like why Brianna Joy Gray is so annoying. Like right now, Republicans are like like here in America, actively trying to repress the rights of several minority groups. And Brianna Joy Gray is like, why is the left virtue signaling about that instead of reforming the FBI? Like, for one, I don't even think the left right now has the political power to do that. I don't even know how they'd go about it.
The only person who's talking about reforming an institution who's raison d'etre, or reform. If you want to reform it, let's talk about reform, Vaush. I'm 100% on board with that.
She's talking about abolition. So are you. And I asked you what reforms you think.
Well, I, Brianna Joy Gray would, but I'm not going to die on this hill. I want to talk. I want in a community with people who are like-minded, Vaush, about what the best strategy forward is. I'm not interested in defending my take. It's just a take. It's just a thought. It's just an idea. I would love to develop. No, I don't want takes, Vaush. I want policy to make the left better. I want to change, make the world.
This is her squirming out of things. She's like, I don't want to defend my take. I'm just here trying to advocate for policy I think will make the left better. This is her trying to disengage from any solid position. She's trying to make it so that she is not on any solid ground and can just kind of... Like, Vaush has a solid, steady, firm position on this. She wants to be able to slide around him. She's so fucking whiny. To be fair, I have her sped up.
World that we live in better. I'm not interested in scoring points on the internet. So if someone comes up to me and says, I have a tweak to your identity, I have a tweak to your philosophy, I have a tweak to your plan, let's develop this in
any content creator who says they don't care about getting points in the internet is lying, okay? Regardless of what your other motives are, getting internet points is always an extra bonus.
Concert with other people who are much more knowledgeable than I say yes and to that, Vaush.
Okay,
I'm not interested in tearing anything down.
I'm yes-anding you right now. So
okay,
let's dial it back because I feel like we've rolled down a very steep hill very quickly. The point that I'm trying to make here is that there are times and places to make certain types of criticisms. Now, whether or not I even agree with the abolish the FBI bit, it's fundamentally what this strikes to me is like an Andrew Tate fan screaming, Andrew Tate's been arrested on accusations of sex trafficking. Let's abolish the police. He shouldn't be able to be arrested for that. And a lefty stride in saying, oh, you want to abolish the police, do you? Well, maybe that would be a good idea. Now, I understand the temptation of this argument because you're meeting them where they're at. They're interested in this thing. But the truth of the matter is, and the thing that frustrates me is, they're not actually interested in police abolition. They're interested in getting their guy off. And while you think that you're doing our side, polling people interested.
I watched it at normal speed, Zan. She's still whiny. Could just be me, though. No, she's definitely whiny. That's a funny pause face.
In getting Donald Trump off over to broader FBI abolition. I think what you're actually doing is the opposite, which is you're giving the institutional legitimacy of the left's critique of the FBI over to the far right, who just want to get Donald Trump off. And I think that's kind of iterating the fact that despite all your caveats and criticisms.
And it's this every time she complains about a thing that maybe it's bad from a left-wing perspective, it always seems like it's in an instance where that institution or that thing is having a right twice a day broken clock scenario, and it benefits the rights narrative. So strange how that happens.
MTG still quote tweeted you, touting around, oh, look at this, lefty, former, secretary for Bernie Sanders. Even they agree the FBI has gone too far. And when they're in that mode, they'll take any stance. They'll say, oh yeah, they killed Dr. King. They killed Fred Hampton, not that they give a shit. And then they'll run with that as a specific part of their program to get their fascist wannabe dictator off investigations and charges. But I don't think it...
I really need to look into Fred Hampton. I've heard a lot of good stuff about him, but I actually have not researched him very much. But he's fucking based as fuck from everything that I've heard. Apparently he has writings, right? Like, Fred Hampton has writings that I could read? I assume they'd be available online? Apparently Fred Hampton wasn't like had some iffy takes earlier on in his life, but got more based later on. That tends to be consistent with most of these civil rights leaders that I hear about, especially in that period of time. Like a lot of black civil rights leaders were they had white cops, and in some, well, probably not black cops, most likely all white cops, literally doing some of the levels of police violence and police brutality that they can't get away with today, all right? And I think after we saw the body cam footage that came out recently, I think we can all agree that the shit they were doing back then before body cam footage, yeah. They killed him when he was 21. Yeah, he was younger. I'm 23. He was 2 years younger than me. Yeah, apparently when he was a little bit younger, like a teenager, he had some cringier takes, but he was literally possibly in the worst of worst situations that you can face as a black American in that era. And as he got older and kind of got into politics, he definitely matured into it. Hell, like, he basically did it at the same rate that I did, right? Like, I was a cringy teenager, and by the time I was 21, I was based. So yeah, I would really like to look into Fred Hampton's stuff, because I feel like, especially based on age, I would probably connect with a lot of what he had to say. Learn a lot from it.
Does much to support real criticism of the FBI. I think it taints criticism of the FBI because it associates them with this insane MAGA, hysteria. I think it worsens our arguments because it connects us and emboldens them to their argument.
So what arguments are the left? You mentioned that this is the wrong time. Is there a movement separate and apart from the conservative movement that is at all vocalizing any interest in reforming the FBI in any way?
I don't even know what reforms we're talking about here. What are we looking to do exactly? Because I don't know if I'd agree with that. I admit, the abolition thing's complicated. You can go a lot of roads with that. But in terms of reform, maybe, if you bite into something a bit more moderate, what would you do exactly? Are we talking about more public warrant approval procedures on the part of judges, or like pullbacks on what they can do to get wiretaps on? Or what would you do exactly?
I think that it's remarkable that in 20 seconds of applying yourself to considering what reforms would be beneficial to the left, you came up with two that sound really good.
I'm fine with those. They're right, though.
But however, there's been absolutely no interest in, or any conversation in the least about that on the left. So
the right will literally shoot down a bill pushed by the Democrats that is like the protect puppies from getting stomped to death bill. And Democrats will vote for it, like 100% of them will vote for yay, and then 100% of Republicans will vote nay. And then actually a few, like 10% of the Republicans won't have even showed up. Like, the Democrats can't even pass the most basic, fundamentally morally good bills without the Republicans shooting them down, okay? You think the Democrats would be able to pass legislation that would abolish or even fucking overhaul or reform the FBI or the CIA or the NSA or the Department of Homeland Security or the ATF or the police departments of the United States or any of these other government branches or government-run institutions? Like,
So here's my thought. I completely agree that Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of these right-wing figures are operating in bad faith. But
all these groups are assholes, by the way. The ATF, too. The ATF literally falsely, it was pretty much falsely, like, fucked over FPS Russia because they were mad that he was blowing up tannerite online, and they thought that it wasn't tannerite. They thought it was some other type of high explosive, and they didn't know that it was tannerite because he never said it was tannerite. It was a whole thing, and then they got him for weed, and it was a whole thing. You should look into it, but fuck the ATF as well.
They deny it, right? So what better way to demonstrate that their argument about abolishing the FBI is complete fluff that's only being used to insulate Donald Trump, one of the most elite people in the world as a former president of the United States, other than actually doing what they have not done, which is promulgating legislation from
the ATF also slaughtered like a shit ton of kids at Waco, right? Like, so from what I've learned of the Waco massacre at this point is that yes, Waco was an insane fucking cult religious bullshit thing that needed to be dismantled. However, sending in like a bunch of ATF agents to just fucking burn it to the ground and kill a bunch of people, like they were killing children and women, and like it was fucked. It was a massacre.
The left that actually would be substantive reforms, the kinds of which I think would appeal to a right audience, a conservative leaning audience, even if it would miff the elected Republicans who of course have bad faith interest.
How would that own them, though? Wouldn't they want that? They don't like the FBI. That's just doing what they want.
But wait a minute. If a left drafts left legislation that would reform the FBI in ways that benefit the left, and the right adopts it and votes for it and passes it, I hate to break it to you, but that's called a win. That's a good thing that just happened.
Would it prevent the FBI from continuing their investigation into Donald Trump, or would it be substantive reforms?
Vaush, it's drafted by the left. So no, of course not. The left, I presume, it can do whatever they want it to be. The left does silly things all
the time. I'm not staking any claims here on their trustworthiness.
The Democratic Party that just spent the entire last 2 years making their entire identity about 1-6 and impeaching Trump for a million, over and over and over again.
When was the last time you heard a Democrat talk about impeaching Trump? Wasn't that towards the end of his presidency? That was like mid 2020 or something, like early 2020 when he got impeached, wasn't it? I think I was still in Florida when he got impeached. He got impeached twice though, didn't he? Maybe that was the first time he got impeached. I was in Florida. Late 2021. Okay, yeah, because he got impeached twice. Didn't he? Yeah, okay. So they impeached him once, back when I was still in Florida, and then they impeached him again after January 6th. Now listen, this is an example of what BJG is doing here right now. She is trying to deflect blame for the fact that the Republicans are in full support of a violent coup that would instill their God Emperor Trump in power. She is basically trying to criticize the Democrats for caring about that and not moving on already, which is exactly the position the right has. The ones that actually like admit what happened. They're just like, oh, okay, maybe it did happen, but move on already. It's been years. Move on. Come on. It's all long behind us, right? They spent the last couple years denying it, and now the ones that actually admit it, it's all about how it's been so long that how can you even hold them accountable for it?
And 1/6 commissions and all of that is not going to do anything that absolves Trump from responsibility, nor do I think they should, although they should have the appearance of not having a witch hunt, because I think that hurts them politically, and there's no need for any of that.
If
he's guilty, what he's guilty of, he's guilty of.
If reform is put forward that does not in any way impede the investigation of Donald Trump, it's a sensible FBI reform. The Republicans will just call it woke. They'll not vote in it, and none of their voters.
Exactly. So here we are. This is what I believe are the two options that exist. The left puts forward good faith legislation that would address some of the legitimate concerns that are being raised by the right about the FBI.
Compromise with the demonic Republicans. That's what we're about to get. We're about to have her explain to us why we should compromise with the demonic Republicans. Let's go.
Call it woke. They'll not vote in it, and none of their voters.
Exactly. So here we are. This is what I believe are the two options that exist. The left puts forward good faith legislation that would address some of the legitimate concerns that are being raised by the right about the FBI, not insulate Donald Trump from criticism,
What concerns?
The FBI has spent the last 100 years of existence growing its power and growing its reach. There is, I think, a perfectly legitimate argument about various aspects of the way that the Department of Justice and the FBI have focused on Donald Trump and some
like what
inequities.
Well, I thought you just said this legislation wouldn't do anything.
Well, that's my whole point. So why are you asking about that, Vaush?
Well, wait, then why did you just say that? You just said that, though. You were just like, okay, well, address some of the
She's trying to get away.
Behavior and the FBI's behavior. It's obviously, even when people do bad things, they can be politically motivated in their approach. I think it's perfectly possible. I don't know, right?
Well,
I don't know.
Wait, we're doing the narrative.
Let me finish the sentence. You just asked me, Vaush. Let me finish the sentence. I don't know, so that's why I don't want to opine.
She's doing it.
But I'm not trying to opine on, for example, whether or not this narrative that's out there that the FBI held up the making public that Joe Biden had these outstanding documents until after the midterms because they didn't want to hurt Democrats. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not interested in promulgating that narrative. But I think that it's completely possible that...
Zan, you're more of a sock dem than a full socialist, right? Let me just tell you guys what my genuine, moral prescriptions to the world are, okay? I think at this point in human history, it is morally wrong that every single human on Earth is not able to live and have their basic fundamental needs for living met as a guarantee. The resources are there. It is simply a matter of distribution. Capitalism, as it exists now, stands not only in a stark opposition to that distribution, but it also incentivizes keeping, at least in its current state, incentivizes keeping the working class, which is 99.9% of people, at a very low quality of living. And the idea is that working your way up to a decent quality of living is a motivation that will power the economy. In reality, I believe that not only is it morally good that every single person should have their basic needs, food, water, shelter, clothing, etc., education, etc., met, but that they should also do this because it is also pragmatically beneficial. I think that if America just guaranteed every citizen its basic needs for life, I think that a lot more Americans would be working. Let's say every American, the second they turn 18, it was okay, if you're moving out from your parents' house, you get this 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 950 square foot house. There you go. No, you've got a bed, you got a little TV, you got a little couch, and you got some basic food in the fridge. Well, you finish the tutorial. Now start playing the game. Imagine if, like, they've gamifying with, like, no consequences for failing working in the economy. People would be working and getting jobs and making money and pushing the economy just to buy luxury goods. Luxury goods are more expensive than basic necessities for survival, typically. People would be saving up to buy furniture and TVs and computers and shit like that. The economy would be doing well. People would be happy. There would be no homelessness. Crime would be violent crime would be heavily down. Like, petty crime would be nearly non-existent, I'd imagine. Like, it's hard to say, like, how many positive outcomes would occur from this. And that is my basic fundamental idea for the world. Like, basically, market socialism is what I believe is the morally best, most ethical, and most probable to, like, actually work economic system that I can think of. However, as it stands now, I typically find myself advocating for more soc dem policies because those are the issues that are at the forefront and actually being voted on or actually being seen by politicians, actually on the ballot. So yeah.
There was some legitimacy in terms of the targeted nature of those attacks. If there's not, then great. Then
but now this is their narrative now.
But look, here's the point, Vaush. Ignore all of that. The point is that you get to design. You keep creating. Here's what's so interesting. You keep coming up with versions of legislation you don't like, when the reality is this is an opportunity to come up with the exact legislation you do like, for the left to be advocating for whatever it is. You don't want to abolish, I do want to abolish. Whatever you want to do is what we should be advocating for, is my belief, progressives to actually take up and run with.
The slight power that I have is over discourse, not policy.
I'm not talking about you literally, Vaush, obviously. I'm talking about what we push elected officials to do.
I understand that. But notice how the rhetoric has shifted, right? Always little bits of it pop up. What we're talking about right now, the left constructing criticisms of the FBI in the form of policy and legislation, has nothing to do with giving the right accolades on getting a broken clock, twice as right kind of deal, on criticizing the FBI, nor on pulling people from the right over, nor on meeting some of their legitimate criticisms of the FBI, of which they have only one, by the way, which is the fact that the FBI doesn't work for them. Now we're just talking about crafting policy to reform the police. The FBI are police, after all, fundamentally, and I've always supported reforming the police in many ways. But notice how now we're talking about something reasonable, which is, hey, the federal police are, as many police institutions, rather corrupt and
I hate to break it to you, but there's a part of this community that has been talking about something reasonable the entire time. And your reluctance to participate in that is a choice, and that's completely fine. But there's some of us who have said,
like doing what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants by abolishing the FBI and giving them accolades and saying they have legitimate criticism and saying the FBI might have been politically motivated when they had Trump. No, you slip in like these narratives here, right? Which aren't necessary when criticizing the FBI. And
she does. She's very, very slippery. She's very, very slippery.
You obviously like the FBI a lot more. Like, you're not going to convince me to not want to abolish.
They always love to do that. This, like, leftier than thou, like, oh, I guess you just really love the FBI then. It's like, no, I have an issue with the fact that you're criticizing them in the rare few cases where they're actually doing something good, like going after Trump.
Abolish the FBI. So I don't even think we should go down that road.
See, well, then at the end of the day, all you want to do is what she wants to do. And so you're prattling about it. It's meaningless. You just want to do...
Wait, no, I don't think I'm prattling about anything. This is my show, and I'd like you to offer me a modicum of respect here, Vaush.
Oh, she's getting triggered.
Prattling is fine. It's a free country.
She's triggered.
I think that's disrespectful. And I've been... Look, in the background of all of this...
Wait a minute. It's fine.
Wait a minute, Vaush. Wait a minute. In the background of all of this is you are sitting here in a way that is...
She likes to say Vaush. She says Vaush a little bit. She hits the Vaush.
In the background is I've been trying not to emphasize what exactly your response to my radar has actually been. The reality is you call me a subhuman piece of shit as a consequence of what I think is, and you just characterized as a reasonable conversation about.
Can I get the Patrick Bateman, like, proud smile? You know the one where he's like, that's me right now. That's me when I heard her say what Vaush said about her. That's me, just the...
reforming the FBI.
I don't think I called you that over that.
Wait a minute. I completely respect that you don't want to abolish the FBI. I don't care. Like, we have a difference of opinion there. I don't think it's worth calling anybody names or accusing, any ad hominem attacks. But my point is this. If all you are willing to get to, if all the place where you're comfortable is to say, wow, in this moment, it would be nice if left progressives or Democrats in Congress were advocating for the kinds of reforms that they think are valuable in this moment to provide a meaningful contrast to the kind of self-interested, elite-protecting reforms that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going for. Wow, I should advocate for that. And to the extent that I think that Brianna is not advocating for that, I can say, well, I think that Brianna needs to have a more focused message. I think that Brianna is going too far, but I would advocate for this. And it is frustrating to me. I do agree with Brianna, but it's frustrating to me that the left Congress members have nothing to say about any of this when they spent years talking about defunding the police, defunding ICE, and having this institutional critique. Where are they in this moment?
Well, I'm not saying
but that's not what happens. Yeah, what are you saying?
Well, I'm saying at the end of the day, you can dress it up as much as you want, but a fascist said that she wants to get rid of an investigative body that's investigating her corrupt dictator pick. And your answer to that was, yes, but for woke reasons. And that framing will always be something that I take issue with. It doesn't matter how sincere or legitimate the criticisms are. There are times when you have to understand that the material course of history is guiding your country in a direction where you're going to have to focus on other priorities. Like, it's with the police thing, right? We're in a very dangerous position in this country right now. Democracy might not last here. Nobody can see the future, but it seems like Republicans are pretty openly anti-democracy at this point. They've been working hard to get rid of it on whatever level they're capable of. And reforming the FBI, that's fine, depending on how it's done, if it's reasonable. But the narratives addressing the right's reasonable criticisms, they have only one, and it's that the FBI don't work for them. Oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene happened to be right on this one. No, she wasn't. She doesn't give a shit about what the FBI has done. Neither do any of her followers. You're not going to own any of them or show them up by giving them a better version of the legislation. They'll say it's woke and they'll toss it in the trash.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that, Vaush. I think that I know for a fact that many of her followers actually do agree with me. I know for a fact.
When you say abolish the FBI, the exact thing that she said.
I also know for a fact that a lot of Marjorie Taylor Greene followers agree a lot with Brianna Joy Gray. I do agree with that. I do believe that. I completely believe you, Brianna, but I don't think that's the brag you think it is. I think it's more of a tell.
Yeah, I know for a fact that many of her followers agree with me on two important points. That the FBI is an institution with enormous power that has been used poorly to target people who are historically vulnerable, including people like them because they're low income and things like that. And additionally, I think that they agree that it should not be an institution that exclusively protects elites. And I think that that's a good place to work from and a much more useful place
than sitting
around.
Is totally conservative.
Wait a minute, let's talk about your framing, Vaush, because you just accused me of wanting to do what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants. But
by your words, you both wanted to abolish the FBI.
If I could just finish the sentence. You accused me of you just said that I want to do what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to do, but for woke stuff. So I want to ask you, is not wanting civil rights leaders, with not wanting Fred Hampton to be murdered, woke?
Can you go back in time and keep him from being murdered? Because if so, goddamn.
Is that what you think that I'm advocating for, or could there be some perspective?
Christ. Hey, Parallax, what's up, buddy? She is very difficult.
Value in protecting people who are oppositional to the government and making sure that the FBI's powers are restrained.
The Republicans will not do this. The Republicans have no interest in restraining the power of the FBI other than curtailing it and using it for their own.
This is such an important point. I think that is actually what defines why there are these two halves of the left that exist right now. There is one half of the left that I think is really exemplified by the statement that you just made, which is that the right won't do this. Or sometimes you'll say things like, Democrats won't do this. And the entire political discourse is limited by what you believe the pre-existing actors in place are willing to do, which means at no point is there any conversation, even in loose, ridiculous kind of podcasty formats, at no point in academic spaces and political spaces and media.
Because we like to keep our discussions centered around reality. Even when we do something like even if we try to use a, what's the word for it? A thought experiment. Even thought experiments that sound very out there that we try to use when making a point, in some way round back to an issue that is actually politically relevant and realistic to be tackled at some point in the near future. We are focused on the here and now. This is what political commentary is about, the here and now. Yes, we have to care about the future, but it is very paramount to be on top of what is going on at this very moment, keeping an audience informed and also entertained.
Media spaces, is there any place to germinate ideas that have the power to actually push the Overton window in any way?
Absolutely.
And I think that's really destructive. And you don't have to agree.
No, there is. But you don't got to jump on a fascist trying to protect their strongman in order to make those points. Because all you're doing is legitimizing and giving left approval credence to them. Same thing Donald Trump did back in 2015, by the way, talked about how the DNC was screwing over Bernie. That wasn't him, and some lefties bought this. That wasn't him sincerely criticizing the corruption of the DNC. That was him, trying to, get a bite of lefty legitimacy as a maverick who could criticize.
I love that example, Vaush, because the man won. The man became president of the United States of America because that message resonated, rightly or wrongly, bad faith or good. So
has he addressed corruption in the political institution?
No, but I'm not Donald Trump. It's the reverse situation, Vaush. It's me saying to a conservative audience, hey, there's some legitimacy. Yes, I believe there's some legitimacy to your concerns here. Just like we opened this conversation talking about.
No, there isn't, because their concern is that Donald Trump is being targeted.
Just like we opened this conversation talking about how there's legitimacy to a lot of these men who have moved to the right because they feel like the social contract has failed them. They don't have a place in society anymore. They have leaned into a kind of misogyny because they don't have traditional gender roles to conform to and feel lost and lonely. I don't think the misogyny is okay. I don't think Andrew Tate is okay. I don't think rape is okay. I don't think any of that is okay. But there's an underlying there.
I don't open that discourse by looking at Andrew Tate going on about how he thinks society has failed men because you can't rape women for free anymore, and go, hey, he's right on this. Not about all of it, mind you, but he is correct in that society has failed men. And you take it from there.
I don't know
what you're doing. I agree you have to reach these people where they are.
Stay there.
Take their bad faith message and go.
Stay there for a second. Stay there. I don't know what Andrew Tate said. I've never listened to Andrew Tate speaking.
But
if Andrew Tate has said something,
that can't be true. She's a political commentator. I know she's kind of a boomer, but still.
Something like a sentence like, I don't think there's a place for men in society anymore. I think it's 100% legitimate to say,
He's like
look,
Zoomer
I disagree
Tucker
with everything that
Carlson.
Andrew Tate stands for. I think that he is normalizing rape and violence against women, and that's disgusting, and he'll probably be criminally liable for it. However, of course, it's true to your audience, and then including people who are like 13 years old, that there's a kind of a crisis of masculinity happening, and I think there's some interesting solutions over here on the left. Why don't you come join me and talk about them?
But your solution
that's
is the same
absolutely
as Marjorie
legitimate.
Taylor Greene's solution: abolish the FBI.
I'm a little confused, Vaush, because
you're doing her work for her, right?
I don't know how many times I can say this because
do you want to abolish the FBI or not?
I, Brianna Joy Gray, think that that's a perfectly legitimate solution. One that, by the way, I could be moved on with people who are knowledgeable about what parts of the institution should stay in place.
I mean, fuck the FBI, but like, why does the fuck the FBI conversation have to be when they're going after Trump for something that's actually valid to go after him for, by the way?
Preserve a certain function that I might agree is useful, etc. Because I claim to be no expert on the entire workings of the FBI as an institution.
That's fine. It's complicated.
But it almost doesn't matter, because what I have said to you now repeatedly is that whatever version of FBI reform that you support, right? Because abolish the police, there's a whole lot of things in there that a lot of different people believe. Some people think it's not really abolishment if you're replacing it with this other institution, that you can call the police or not call the police, but has a very different function and different funding and different framing and all of those kinds of things. But the point is, this was an opportunity for substantial reform, whether or not you want it to be.
Yeah, I am also very frustrated that she's not Brianna Greyjoy. It would be much better if she was Brianna Greyjoy, like from Game of Thrones.
Quote unquote abolish or not.
It's not an opportunity for substantial reform.
And it was an opportunity for liberals, leftists, whomever in Congress who were elected to call Marjorie Taylor Greene's bluff and say, this is actually populist legislation that protects vulnerable people against the overreaches of the government. This is what you're purporting to want, and if you actually believe in it, sign on to this legislation.
And when she
doesn't, I'm like 6 words away from
okay, all right, okay, you're 6. Okay, we're at the end. Okay, we're at the goal.
And when she doesn't, that's the opportunity to call her bluff.
Okay, you can't call their bluff. We've been doing this for decades.
We literally haven't.
No, you will. The Democrats have.
The Republicans are not well-meaning people. Okay, many Republican voters are, but as far as the Republican politician base and the demagogues, the talking heads, you know what I mean? These are not well-meaning people who have like a slightly different but still overall morally good endgame for America, and we just have different ways of achieving that. They are literally evil and want to make everything worse in every way for everyone.
That's how easy it is.
No, they haven't.
No, they have been. Because the Republicans will talk about any manner of emboldening or empowering the American people, or helping the American people get more change in their pockets, or lowering taxes or anything. And every single time the Democrats do anything that would objectively improve the lives of the working class, the Republicans go, this is woke, and don't pass it. Oh, any climate change reform? That's woke. Anything having to do with green energy? That's woke. Anything having to do with like unions or healthcare or anything? That's woke. Toss it out. There is no calling their bluff, because while they may say they care about the FBI exercising power over the weak, internally they have a consistent message, was they want power and they want to kill you. You, of course, being whatever marginalized group is on the table these days, probably not me. The idea that you can
I think that you're wrong about that, but I'll just put a pin in that, let you finish. Go ahead.
You can't call their bluff on this. It doesn't serve any point. The only thing you're doing is listening to a fascist trying to embolden her political strategy for removing democracy and all the barriers that prevent her from doing so, and going,
Marjorie Taylor Greene is literally the Jewish space laser lady, by the way.
Yes. I think that she's right on this point. And then you propose a solution identical to hers. And
wait.
And then
the solution is not identical to hers. How many times are you going to say that straw man?
I'll caveat you. Now we're interrupting both ways. And the reform version, the more let's introduce the discourse here, you still frame as addressing some of Republicans' legitimate concerns. They have none. They have none. The Republicans are uniformly against any kind of power being taken away from authoritative institutions. They will back anything that can be done to empower the police, anything that can be done to empower the FBI, the DOJ, or the CIA.
I'm sorry, it's not true.
Wait, Brianna spoke at a Nick Fuentes convention? Jesus Christ.
They're in charge. And when they have the power to take over those institutions, like Donald Trump tried to by firing Mueller, or firing the directors and putting his own cronies in charge, the way the DOJ, I forget it's Barr, tried to get sedition charges being brought to Black Lives Matter protesters, they don't give a shit about federal power being used to cripple the little guy, as long as they're the ones doing it. And all we're doing is giving legitimacy to their lie when we pretend they have any motivations other than the raw accumulation of power. There are plenty of things the Republicans...
No, not Brianna Joy Gray. That was MTG. Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke at a Nick Fuentes event, and then Brianna Joy Gray has defended Marjorie Taylor Greene. My bad. I misread chat.
Have done to indicate they actually care about taking power away from corrupt institutions. They have done 0 of these. None. Zilch, nada. They don't do it, and they don't care.
So I said this at the beginning, and I would just like to say this again. And I hope that we don't have to keep going back to this point. There is a difference between Republican voters, regular conservative people to whom these arguments appeal, and elected conservatives. There's no need to debate what elected conservatives in a position of power, what their investments in preserving their own power. Everybody agrees about this. Just like we don't have to go round and round and round.
No, everyone does not agree about this. A shit ton of people still vote Republican because they fooled them into thinking these culture war issues like the right is on the right side of these culture war issues. The reason why so much of the left needs to be focusing on the culture war talking points and countering the right's position is because people are voting based on their position in these culture war issues. Tucker Carlson might decide elections in the future.
About whether or not Marjorie Taylor Greene was a good faith or bad faith actor. As I said repeatedly in my radar, despite you and your response to my radar accusing me of being credulous and taking her at face value, I don't know how many times I can say it. This isn't about Marjorie Taylor Greene. This isn't about convincing elected Republicans. This isn't about any of that.
Voters
it's the fact that regular people on the ground feel differently about this. And I'm sorry, like this is maybe just a difference of opinion, but my interactions with and real world understanding of the political smorgasbord that is the political diversity of this country and the random groups of beliefs that end up in any one given person who then identifies as conservative or liberal or somewhere in between. It's just not that neat and it's not that clean. And maybe we'll just disagree about this because we have different experiences in the world and of humanity. But I know for a fact that there are people who have a good faith interest in a lot of things, including a good faith concern about the IRS targeting working class people, which is a true thing that happens, even though I think that abolishing the IRS does in the same way that abolishing the FBI potentially could if there weren't other prongs of the Justice Department, et cetera, to hold Trump accountable, end up letting millionaires and billionaires off the hook from getting audited and taxed at all, right? So I think that people, even though conservatives are weaponizing this IRS thing to try to, yes, insulate rich people from getting audits, it's good to say, hey, I hear you when you say you're concerned that the IRS has historically targeted the poor. I hear you when you say that this is a legitimate concern, and it is a legitimate concern. But if you don't meet people there, if you don't acknowledge that there's a core of something there, they have no reason to trust you politically. And maybe you're interested in convincing people and changing anybody's mind, and maybe my political...
This is hilarious to hear from somebody who is... Brianna Joy Gray is not somebody who de-radicalizes people on the right. Vaush does de-radicalize people on the right. In droves, he does. Brianna Joy Gray is somebody who kowtows to the right and grows an audience of people on the right, and then claims that that is essentially, de-radicalizing them, making them more open to her left-wing, quote-unquote, positions.
Political project and trying to do so is ultimately a futile one. But I can't see that. I do not believe that there's more utility sitting in these media spaces, talking endlessly about what can't be done while the world burns, because a lot of people can't afford to extend the status quo in this way. And some of us want to just try things and throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And you said, I'm sorry, one last point of what you said, just really quickly. You said
people can't afford to extend the status quo. I'm sorry, but guess what? This status quo, whole lot better than what happens if the right wins, okay? And it's not even status quo. The right, okay, do not let people like Brianna Joy Gray make you think that we're living in a different reality, okay? We are not in the status quo, quote unquote, okay? That's not what this is. Bills are being passed nonstop that are either taking rights away from groups or protecting their rights. And that has been the case nonstop for at least the last 2 years in recent memory, okay? Like, there has not been a status quo. Things have not been calm and chill. The right has been on the attack, and the left has been on the defense. And that has been how things have been going for a while now. It is constantly wavering back and forth. If you want to call that the status quo, then sure, but the only way to change it is either full elimination of the right or full elimination of the left, which is what will happen if the right wins.
Offering, again, you keep saying the same thing as Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't care what you put in this legislation, but you cannot, you argue that the left calls, or liberals, whatever, the broad left calls Republicans on their shit all the time. It literally doesn't happen because Democrats never put forward clean bills advocating for populist policies. They never do it. We saw this happen with the $15 minimum wage, where it was part of a must-pass bill. Democrats intentionally took it out so that it could be killed. It was a 51 bill, right? It was part of the COVID reconciliation package. Schumer took it out, didn't have to, but took it out on the advice of the parliamentarian, which is advisory. So then it was subject to a 60 vote margin. It could be voted down by Marjorie Taylor Greene and, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, right? Over and over again, they will never have a standalone bill on things that they know are overwhelmingly popular and they'll make them look bad. They just won't. They bifurcated the bill back better. They do this over and over again. So we never get these clean demonstrations that Republicans are against XYZ. Look at how Bernie has to run around defending that he voted for the crime bill because it had the Violence Against Women's Act in it. That's what they do. In fact, that's what Democrats always do to provide cover for the fact that they are not actually a populist or worker-centered party in the least, and they actually want substantially the same kinds of economic policy that the Republicans want. They just wanted to be a little bit nicer to the gays and the blacks and the immigrants.
Not substantially the same when Republicans are calling for the abolition of the IRS, but I do agree that they're closer to the middle than a lot of people want to acknowledge. I'm not making an argument for the efficacy of the Democratic Party here. I'm only saying that you can take a pretty clean look at what the Republicans or, McConnell failed to table or what they've shot down in the Senate or the House or whatever. It's pretty obvious that Republicans, just in terms of their policy prescriptions, once they get in office, are evil and want bad things. That sounds like a sort of childlike simplicity, but it's actually the God's honest truth. Fake complexity is as misleading as fake simplicity. They will vote against things that are objectively good for the American people over and over over and over again, doesn't seem to affect their voters' opinions of them that much. Now, I believe you can pull people over. By the way, you said you want to build a project and reaching out to people, and that the complex variety of their positions make a more unique and fractured voter than what might be seen just by how people vote. And I agree with that. People are very complicated. The issue I have is that there's a critical difference between the situations we're talking about here. When it comes to the concerns of a voter, reaching out to them, taking their bad idea, like abolishing the IRS, and saying, "Hey, listen,
I don't think it's a bad idea. But if you want to call it not abolishing the IRS, if you want to call it reform the IRS, can we please just stick with that? If you think that, because it's not the same thing.
Wait, I gotta finish. Wait, abolishing the IRS would absolutely be a bad idea. We have no systems in place.
I'm sorry. I thought we were still talking about the FBI. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. The FBI, but also more so the IRS. Okay, the IRS. Whew, yeah, no, okay. But anyway, you take a Republican who wants to abolish the IRS. I think you can walk up to them. I think you can go, okay, listen, I got you, buddy. Okay, but we got to talk about this. Spin it off. I think that's okay. The issue I have is who you do it to, on what specific issues, and how you sell it. MTG, I think, is a no-go. I wouldn't agree with her on literally anything that she said, did, or believed that I thought benefited her agenda, because her agenda is oblivion.
Well, you agree with her on one thing. You agree with her about being anti-force the vote.
I mean, we both drink water, I guess. Sure. Wait, was she? Oh, that's right. Because she was one of the people who was consistent about. Yeah. So we got water, sky is blue in that. And
wait a minute. But why is it that it's like water, sky is blue when it's something like that? But to me, obviously, wanting to dramatically limit the powers of an arm of the police state is a no-brainer consideration. The fact that me and Marjorie Taylor Greene are both interested in curbing government power is.
She's not.
She's not.
She's saying,
she's saying, keep doing that.
Let me rephrase.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is a fascist who has said that she wants Donald Trump to be the forever president of America, okay? She is not... What a pause face for Vaush. She is not at all somebody who is in favor of... Or he is not somebody who... Or sorry, yeah. MTG is not someone at all who is in favor of, like, limiting the power of the police state. They need that police state to do that genocide she wants to do.
That she's saying she's interested in curbing government power is an opportunity for, like, I don't understand why you think that it's like you're talking as though MTG has the ability to write whatever legislation Democrats put forward. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. If she wants to open this broad category of FBI reform, if she wants to open that Pandora's box, she's able to do so, frankly, because she knows that the Democrats are too feckless to actually call her bluff and do anything about it.
Nobody cares about the FBI.
Well, you don't maybe care about that.
No.
You don't care about the FBI.
No. The average American does not care about it. It's not like a key voters issue. Police reform is way more up there, and even that just gets towered over by others.
But they're not doing that either, Vaush. That's the whole point. That's what's so embarrassing about this whole fiasco. That we had the largest number of people in the streets in a protest movement in American history 2 years ago, to which the Democratic nominee responded, "We need more funding for more cops."
Yeah, I agree. We live in a hell world. I completely agree. We're all dying.
Why are people so... It's so funny to hear, like, when they, like, it's always different, right? So when a class reductionist like Brianna Joy Gray wants to shit on Biden, it's one angle, but then when righties, like full-on conservatives and fascists, want to shit on Biden, it's from another angle, right? So Brianna Joy Gray is mad that Biden wants to fund the police. The right is mad that Biden wants to defund the police. What Biden actually wants to do is fund police departments so that they can afford to create new sectors focused on other tasks that are not fit for the police to accomplish, such as helping to calm down and offer help to somebody having a meltdown or a breakdown, people with mental disabilities. It is very common that cops are just not trained, they do not know how to handle an outburst from somebody who may have schizophrenia, or who may have like autism or something like that, right? These are things that, like, we need. Neither are teachers, yeah. We need an entire sector of our law enforcement dedicated to nonviolent resolution of these situations, suicidal people as well, right? And that's what Biden actually wants to do. Give money to police departments so they can afford to create those sectors, I guess. Now, if we're being completely honest, there are a whole lot of police departments in this country that are heavily overfunded and heavily over-militarized that could probably redirect a lot of the funding they already have to doing this, but I would honestly say that what Biden was trying to do was a pretty damn reasonable middle ground, okay? And the fact that the right and Brianna Joy Gray type lefties, like, attack him for the opposite thing on this is so funny to me.
We live in a hell world. Why is there no accountability?
Listen, I like
Biden did that, and you told people to go vote for Biden without any condition.
Yes, because there are two candidates who can win, and one is worse than the other. There are two states the FBI. There are two states the FBI can exist in right now.
It's just so simple. One of these two guys wins. One is worse than the other. It's just that simple. It's just that simple.
Wait, please. There are only 2 states in which can exist right now as represented by the interests of people currently in power.
That's not true.
No. That is. Wait, who is fronting a public, support for FBI reform?
Nobody, that's my point! That's my point! That's the problem! That's the very problem!
So you're agreeing with me then? Based on who is currently in power, there are 2 possible things that we can do with the FBI.
No, I'm not agreeing with you.
Stop. You just agreed with me.
I'm advocating. No, I'm not. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Exactly. I'm advocating for a third opportunity, a third option. That's my job.
So if to get that option, you have to change the current situation, that would imply that an unchanged situation, aka what we exist in now, is one with 2 options, as represented by the interests of people.
No, there's by that definition, there's only one option because there was only one party advocating anything, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene. So by your metric, there's only one thing out there.
An option.
Fine.
So then that's it. We have that and we have this.
No, Vaush, this is so ridiculous.
No, you can change it. You can get 3, but right now there are 2. You agree with me. Right now there are 2. You can fight for 3. Right.
Who cares? I am fighting for 3, and you're convincing people to take 1 of 2 options because you're too afraid to advocate for anything in the world.
Fighting for option 3 is not telling people to vote, not vote at all or vote third party. You vote to maintain the status quo from falling to a worse state, and then you fight to make things better. That it's very simple. I feel like it makes a lot of sense. You have to be intentionally dense for this not to make sense to you.
That's real.
We're almost there. You are tying option number 3 to the insane bad faith fascists.
She's calling him patronizing.
No, I'm not.
No, BGG.
Okay, I'll explain it to you. I'll explain it to you real slow. Let me answer your question. Just ask me why.
Wait, please. We have 2 institutional options right now, okay? We have 2 parties, if we may. We have the MAGA group and we have Democrats and moderates broadly. The MAGA group are composed entirely of fascists and people who want to abolish our democracy. And the moderate-leaning Republicans, the moderates, and the Democrats are some neutral flavor of law and order to maybe mild reform of the police. Why would you hinge any reform of the FBI to the fascists and not to the legitimate concerns of people who are arguing against police brutality? If you wanted to reach out to people who want to reform the FBI, don't reach out to MAGA voters, reach out to liberals. They were the ones out there on the streets protesting against police brutality, ineffectively, I might add, because we live in a hell world. But if you're going to tie FBI reform to some kind of optical or political front or movement, why would you do it to the worst people with the worst intentions rather than the not worst people with the not worst intentions? This is the issue that I have. Our power is in our voice. Our legitimacy conveys strength to broader public fronts. Marjorie Taylor Greene runs this train, not you, or Donald Trump technically does.
So you can use words like hinge and tie and do what you want. But I think most people understand.
Articles like and 2.
I think that most people understand. My audience has no cognitive difficulty in processing, exploiting a opportunity rhetorically in the
all
political
audiences
field.
have cognitive difficulties. Trust me, I have one.
My audience gets it. My audience, there's nobody who didn't already have a bad faith.
My back is tensing up with, like, fucking vicarious stress for Vaush. I can feel how tense he is getting, and it's affecting me. It's actively, like, spreading through time and space to affect me.
There's nobody in my audience who didn't already have a bad faith perspective of me, who's gotten a lot of clicks and views out of calling me every name in the book and criticizing every word out of my mouth, frankly. Unless you already had an inclination to think the worst of me, nobody who heard me say, Marjorie Taylor Greene is an utter fool, but she's opened the door to something that is legitimate, which is that the FBI needs to be abolished. Let's say substantive reform, since that's a sticking point for you and you disagree on that issue. And this is like, Jesus Christ, dude, come on!
It's like saying the Nazis opened the door to anarchism because they abolished the Wehrmacht government, you know? Do you think
it's appropriate to continually compare Marjorie Taylor Greene, one elected representative of the United States of America, to the Nazi regime that killed 6 million plus Jews and however many tens of millions of Russians?
Absolutely. The fact that you don't think that's appropriate is insane to me. Like, genuinely unhinged.
Okay. I think that's pretty...
Start talking about January 6th. Start talking about the zip ties, what they were there to do, why they were there. Just they literally tried to do a violent coup.
Respectful to millions of dead people and real life consequences, but we don't have to go down that road. I think, look, I think it's rhetorical.
You'll just drop a shoe at the door and then leave it.
I think it's rhetorically. I think there's a reason why Goodwin's Law is what it is. It's rhetorically, I think, weak to constantly have to shoehorn Nazis into every argument to make your point.
She just said Goodwin's Law. So for those that don't know, Godwin's Law is basically it's a fallacy or a call out of a fallacy in which people will bring up the Nazis as a comparison to a thing now in order to make an argument for how bad it is, right? It's an internet rule, yeah. Here's the thing, though. Sometimes things are like the Nazis. I know it's a crazy thought, but Nazis didn't go extinct when World War II ended. Some things are Nazi-esque. And that's just how it is.
I don't think that either of us needs to do
and
that.
They're fascists. It's a perfectly valid comparison, especially since in this case, Marjorie Taylor Greene also wants to abolish a federal institution that she's just using as a bulwark to achieve power, but other people might misinterpret.
85% of what the FBI has done is to crush people like me, people who are black, people who are left, people who are... But I know that she doesn't care, Vash. Why did you say that to me? I know she doesn't care.
Why do you keep bringing it up?
Wait a minute. I know she doesn't care.
The Weimar Republic had done so many bad things. Do you think that made it more justifiable when the Nazis said they wanted to abolish it in favor of putting Hitler as the emperor?
So the argument is...
No, wait, you answer that. The Weimar Republic had done like mostly bad things. It was a government in
the argument is that if the left...
early 20th century.
The argument is that if the left wants to make if the right wants to make a claim, like the police are bad. This is what was happening at the moment. After years of criticizing the left and calling everybody Antifa and flying Blue Lives Matter flags, between 1-6 in this moment, there has been a really interesting shift and realignment inside the Republican Party.
They're all still pro-law and order.
They're not.
They are. They all. If you take a look at what motivates Republican voters and which candidates tend to win in the midterms, law and order rhetoric, cracking down on the violent protesters, Antifa.
They're not all still law and order.
No,
they are.
Wait a minute.
They are. The only time they haven't been was for the January 6th rioters, the insurrectionists. That's the only time where they're not pro law and order.
Wait a minute. I am not making a claim that now all...
Oh, and of course, if it's someone like Andrew Tate, being prosecuted for sex trafficking, of course, they don't want law and order there either.
Republicans hate the police. I'm not making the claim that 90% of the Republicans hate the police. I'm not saying no such thing. What I'm arguing is that there is a new vulnerability in their arguments. There's a new subtlety to these arguments where for the first time, and perhaps a long time, Republicans can imagine a world in which they are oppositional to the police. It's not just a consequence of 1-6. I don't know if you watched that Andrew Callahan documentary.
Where's Virgil, Brianna? Where's Virgil?
There are all of these interesting moments that are burbling up. And Marjorie Taylor Greene saying this thing about the FBI was in some ways like the highest profile crack in what has been a very formidable defense or alignment, I should say, of Republicans and the police since time immemorial, it seems. Now, you can say that's not a real thing. It's a superficial crack. It's not a real thing. It doesn't matter. And I understand that you disagree with this, but my perspective is it's worth chipping away at that and see how far we can go. Let's chip away at that and either force them to double down and go back to saying they love the police and that's fine, whatever, no love lost, or create opportunities. If they're going to tell their audiences, if they're going to speak to the average conservative voter and say, actually, the police aren't always good. Oh, actually, maybe we shouldn't have qualified immunity. Maybe police members should be held accountable too, because sometimes they go after people that I like. How is it?
The right, you have to be okay with contradictory beliefs to vote Republican. You have to be willing to be anti, Blue Lives when it came to the cops, the DC police at January 6th, while also being pro Blue Lives when it comes to their police brutality against black protesters during the George Floyd riots. Like, yeah. The cops were beating the shit out of journalists during the Floyd protests. Like, during completely peaceful protests, not even the riots that happened. The peaceful protests, there would be, like, a line of journalists with cameras, like, big, expensive, like, TV cameras, because these aren't, like, random nobody journalists. These are, like, CNN and MSNBC and even Fox News. And they're, like, there with their cameras recording, and the riot cops come in and start beating the shit out of the journalists that are just there recording with the film cameras for the news. I wonder if I could find the clip where the riot cop bashes that one journalist 5 times in the stomach with a riot shield to try to knock the camera out of his hand. Yeah,
It's delusional. Even Donald Trump, there's been a conservative push to end qualified immunity for years. That's a real thing.
They're only after power if it's in their way. There is no institutional support for broad police reform.
Of course that's true,
The current conservative darlings are Trump, who said that we should suspend the Constitution, and DeSantis, who is currently constructing his own little Oceania down there in Florida. The current leading conservative constitutional interpretation theory is one where they essentially abolish originalism and go in favor of a kind of paternalistic Christian nationalism. They are purely authoritarian in every element of their political advocacy, and coincidentally, the only time they seem to have a problem with power is when it's in their way. Why would you ever give this any weight or credence?
What's so crazy about
why pretend it's a crack? It's not a crack. They're a unified wall.
What's crazy is that, literally in my radar, every time I talk about these things, I'll say exactly that, and you don't hear it. It's like you don't want to hear it.
It's a steel block.
I'll say, hey, audience, this is a principle, whether it's free speech or limiting government power, and you believe in it. Now, the people that you like on the right who are talking about these things, they're saying they believe in those things, but they're not really good faith actors. They're just trying to protect their own. I just did a radar like this about the IRS. So if you genuinely believe in these principles, like the poor should be targeted by the IRS, here's alternative policy. For example, part of Bernie Sanders' wealth tax was to have a 30%, I think, quota for millionaires and billionaires getting taxed to try to correct for how disproportionately poor people are getting or audited, not taxed, right? So you can meet them where they are. You say, I understand why these things appear.
I cannot believe that she is dumb enough for this to make sense to her. She's too successful to be this dumb. She's got to be like, this has got to be like a grift. This has got to. I can't imagine somebody holding progressive positions and genuinely at their core caring about the world becoming a better place and thinking these decisions and these actions and advocating for these things is the best way to do this. It's got to be a grift. It's got to be. My brain is actively hurting trying to emulate a mind. Like, I'm usually pretty good at emulating the brains of a conservative in my own mind because they're very stupid. It doesn't take that much processing power. But, like, Brianna is just throwing curveballs left and right because she just has to take the contrarian position to the left on issues where she feels the right will be amicable to her ideas.
To you. They're not actually going to do those things.
But the right isn't really amicable to her ideas. They just think, oh, okay, well, she agrees in this one aspect of this thing, right?
To help you, right. So then you pivot. That's all this is. And look, at the end of the day,
good. Wait, that was good. I have no problem at all.
That's literally what my radar was. But you have a hang about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that's fine. You obviously think that she is more dangerous and more.
I don't like fascists. That's true. That's a lefty principle of mine. Look, that's literally.
That's fine.
Wait, BJG, you've literally hit the issue. If everything that you had said was, here's an issue Republicans are concerned about, I don't think they're coming at it from the right angle. Here's the right angle.
That's literally what I said in the radar. We'll play the radar right here, by the way, in the podcast, so everybody can see word for word.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has become America's favorite broken clock, and it's that time of day where she's regretfully 100% right. Now, I don't take her critique.
I like how this clip doesn't really do a good job of making her look good. It's like, yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene is once again a broken clock who's right twice a day. Like,
in good faith. I don't expect her to keep this up when a candidate of her liking is in control of the deep state, but you should. Her hypocrisy doesn't have to be the hypocrisy of the average conservative voter.
I said Marjorie Taylor Greene is a bad faith actor. They don't really mean this. They're only doing this to protect Trump. However, this is what the left should be doing. And the fact that I say that, and you still hit me with all these bad faith attacks. And by the way, you didn't just call Marjorie Taylor Greene a fascist. You called me a fascist.
Fascist enabler at times. We'll get to your Ukraine takes, I'm sure. It's not about the core of the arguments you just laid out to me.
Do you think that's useful? I mean, if you honestly think I'm a fascist enabler and someone who wants to murder Ukrainian children.
Hey, chat. Did you catch the dishonesty? Hey, class, before I press play, before we hear Vaush'S response, who caught the dishonesty? Vaush'S said, "You're a fascist enabler." She replied, "You think I'm a fascist enabler? You think I am evil and want bad things to happen to blah, blah, blah?" That's not what Vaush'S said. That's very different framing from what he said. There's a very big difference from seemingly, possibly, unknowingly benefiting fascists and actively wanting to benefit fascists. He didn't say that. He is criticizing the outcomes of your behavior.
The last one was a joke.
Wait a minute. But wait a minute. Why would you agree to come on Rising and look me in the face and be friendly and nice and act like all is well in the world? What? If you really have that level of antagonism toward me, if you really think that I'm as bad a person as you tell your audience repeatedly, then why even agree to come on Rising in the first place?
First of all, a couple of things. I've sat face to face with Charlie Kirk. You know,
So have I.
Right, okay. I talk civilly with him. I don't have any qualms about that. Second of all, I say mean things about a lot of people. It's genuinely just
But why, Vaush? Because I've been accused of being a grifter. I've been accused of ginning up, fighting over.
Because strong expressions of angry emotion towards people who are doing bad things is not only cathartic, but also entertaining for people who see it. It's really just that simple.
But I don't take personal attacks at people. I don't do response videos to try to create beef. In fact, I'm inviting you here today in part because I've ignored you. I've chosen not to engage. It doesn't seem constructive. But because you were so, frankly, kind of polite and humble on Rising, I thought there might be a genuine opportunity for us to have a meeting of the minds at the very least. But then you make a joke like the one you just made and it makes me feel like this is a fool errand.
No, what we're having right now isn't a breakdown in communication. It's an aesthetic difference in how we approach what we do.
Well, I
you come from a background.
Human, I don't feel
dude.
like
How fucking that's so LARPy. I'm sorry. I hate the way she worded that. That actually sent a shiver up my fucking spine, dude. A meeting of the fucking minds. Ugh, dude. What the fuck? Yeah, I'm imagining the what are the big-headed guys from Marvel? The Watchers. Yeah, I'm imagining the Watchers right now when I think the meeting of the minds. I don't know. She's just very cringy with the way she talks in general. She's very condescending, right?
An aesthetic difference. It feels degrading and unconstructive in a space that actually means a lot.
Well, Vaush'S started this being pretty reasonable and not mean or anything like that. She is the one who actively like continued the conversation to places where he has maintained its positions. He hasn't fallen back on anything that he hasn't like rolled back anything he's said. He maintains everything that he's said, no matter how vitriolic it may have sounded. He stands by that. He's just being polite right now.
To me, because I think the project that we're ostensibly both involved in is an incredibly important one. This isn't like, I'm not trying to be like famous on the internet from talking about politics. I only became well, no, I was an attorney with a very good salary that didn't need any of this, to be honest. So I'm here because my passion for these issues drove me to start freelance.
Wait, no! Brianna, no, you just outed yourself as a liar. Oh, no. Do you guys remember her talking about how before this she was, or no, actually actively while doing content, she was living in a not a penthouse, what's it called? A studio apartment and barely getting by? Who remembers that? Her tweets about living in a studio apartment. They were literally like a couple years ago. Like it was recent. She's so full of shit here. So either she was lying now, or she's lying now, or she was lying then.
I ended up getting a full-time position, and I ended up getting plucked by the Bernie campaign to be a part of this. That's why I'm here. And I'm not trying to grandstand to say that, but like I just want to be honest about emotionally, it feels very frustrating to feel like you're trying to do something constructive. I'm open to criticism. I'm open to saying this is a different suggestion. We can go this way and that way. You don't like force of vote? Okay, so Rhoda had these other asks that was so constructive. We grew, we developed, we moved forward. But it seems to me that your position, that your desire is to like coin winners or losers, dub winners or losers, good people or bad people, grifters and not grifters, fakes or legitimate folks. And that seems to be ultimately very destructive to me, to this broader project that I think that—
Yeah, to be fair, if it was in New York City, that is, you know, there's literally apartments that are the size of my closet that are like $1,200 a month in New York.
We share, no?
We definitely share it to an extent. And I don't think that, I mean, there's obviously a huge overlap in the stuff that we actually do believe. I do genuinely believe that a lot of this is an aesthetic difference. If I was feeling cynical, I would accuse you of engaging in a kind of civility politic here, right? I mean, there were plenty of sincere, well-minded political activists back in the 1980s who have shown up in leather strap or like punk mohawks.
Well, that wouldn't bother me.
They might have. Well,
and
they might have been
doesn't
mean.
bother me. That doesn't bother me.
They might have been mean too, right?
Like either you really think you believe that narrative that I am indifferent to the interests of Ukrainian children, or you don't. Like, which is it? Don't bring it up as like a joke. Do you think that I am happy, that I laugh at genocide and think it's great for Ukrainian children to be killed? Is that something that you think? Then let's talk it out. But don't bring it up as a joke.
I wasn't under the impression that particular bit would get to you so much. But if you want my sincere—
Oh no, Vaush'S lag.
It's real life.
That's fine. Wait, I'm not insulting.
I don't think that Ukrainian children being dead is a joke, in fact.
Wait, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be insincere there. When I said got to you, I wasn't trying to epically own you by indicating you're emotionally involved in the stuff you talk about. I am too. The sincere, actual, non-joking, fully straightforward position that I have on that debate that you had was that I only saw the damn clip. But I do know that a lot of lefties, and people adjacent to lefties even, not just lefties, have attitudes on the Ukraine war that I consider to be outright fascist apologia. I don't think that makes them irredeemable people, or that I shouldn't speak to them, or that they're bad people fundamentally, or that they're malicious or lying or anything. But I do care about these issues, and it's a product of the fact that I care about these issues that I take the stances that I do. If I fly off the handle a little bit too much, I think that's a fine criticism. You know, nobody's perfect.
So having you didn't actually watch the episode, you just saw the clip and you made it I don't actually know, did you do a response video on my position on Ukraine?
I saw it on stream. If it got turned into a video, that would have been my editors. I don't think I talked about that for more than like 30 seconds though. So I don't think I did a full thing.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that.
Do you think it's responsible? Like maybe it's fine. Like I can't believe everyone makes clips about me. For all that I'm called a grifter, it seems that I'm fueling the media ecosystem of YouTube with everybody making clips about my original.
Brianna Joy Gray is somebody who, if you're going to like, I will say my one criticism of Vaush'S on this is he probably should have 2x speeded all of his old videos covering Brianna Joy Gray and wrote down and like cataloged the particular evidence that he went over, just to be prepared, because like the things that they're going to talk about are the things that he's said about her. So it would be good to catch himself up on all of that and make sure that he has a fresh mind about it, because he'll be able to actively call her out on the lies in each of these, you know, scenarios that she's talking about with a more fresh reminder. Oh no, you actually said this. I'm not letting you get away with like rephrasing what you actually said when I was responding to your video here, you know?
Content.
Well, you know how much people dislike me, right? So that's a mutual thing right there. People get real mad about me.
I can't speak to what people say about you. I have very consciously chosen not to engage because I don't think that kind of thing is constructive. And if somebody who wouldn't learn listening to me is listening to you and saying Medicare for all is a good idea, at the end of the day, I'll let sleeping dogs lie. That's to me the net benefit, and I don't need to tear you down or talk about anybody else on the internet. That's not my business.
Well, right, you don't do reactive content quite as much, right? If you're live streaming, of course, you go over all the clips and videos and arguments and discourse that you see and react to it.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not, and I don't mean this, you know, we're in different spaces and it's fine to be an entertainer. It's fine. But like, that's not my niche. So all I would say to that is like, I think it would be useful and good and probably actually elevate your content. I mean, that sounds patronizing, I don't mean it like that, but I think it would be useful and good to perhaps review everything in total, in context, to assume good faith of people. That's the irony of the name of my podcast. The whole point is that to try to engage legitimately and in good faith with all of these arguments, even with people I disagree. And that means not taking an isolated clip or even
I just want him to ask where Virgil is. I need him to ask where, just, where's Virgil? Where's Virgil? Where's Virgil?
within the clip, frankly, I think I made myself clear, but not taking an isolated clip and
Where's
making
Virgil,
content
Texas?
on it that causes people to make jokes or claims about me, like I like and enjoy the death of Ukrainian children. That's all I would say.
With respect, I think that we're both culpable of this, even in this conversation to an extent. Like you mentioning that I'd called you subhuman, or you saying that it was disrespectful to the millions of dead that I might make a comparison to Nazi Germany. These are things that both of us do, intentionally or otherwise, to lower the opinion of the other in the eyes of our audience. Or I guess in this case, whoever is sympathetic to me who watches this content on your end, since I'm not live streaming. I don't think, look, I'm fine with banter and insults back and forth. I love that shit. Oftentimes I feel like a hyperfixation on it's to the detriment of the conversation because people get all up in arms about who's being ruder to who. The idea is obviously for everyone to be polite. But we both shouted.
You can tell she wants to interrupt right now. She wants to interrupt very badly. I can tell when somebody has, like, I can tell by facial expression when someone wants to interrupt.
We both made jabs at each other. I think that's wonderful.
I don't
think it's bad faith.
Shouting. I don't have an issue with any of that. I think that, look,
there you go.
At worst, I could be accused of, Vaush, not understanding the existential harm that Marjorie Taylor Greene and her politics present to the United States. At worst, you could say that I, underestimate.
Like I said, I'm very good at telling when someone's about to interrupt.
The potential harm that could come of me saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene is right about this one narrow issue. And that's a perfectly legitimate criticism.
I see the look in their eyes.
You know that you went a lot further than saying that.
Fascist apologia, yeah. Which I stand by. I think that you've engaged in it to an extent. Okay. It's fine. Who doesn't do that, right? I mean, the first principle of being a lefty is to hate other lefties.
I don't think that I do.
And
in fact,
that's
I think
important.
that the FBI is a fascist organization if we want to use these kinds of words. And I could easily say that wanting to defend and protect the FBI. I think that Biden's a fascist. I talked to Cornel West about this at length.
Then call me a fascist apologist. Do it. If you think that, then you should have no problem calling me that, right?
But I don't actually think that that's true, Vaush. And I also don't spend my time attacking. I attack the powerful. I'm interested in attacking, or not attacking, but in criticizing Joe Biden because he has the power to affect so many lives. I'm interested in attacking
political figures have power online.
I'm not interested in arguing with podcasters. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the point. And I think that you serve a valuable role. I think a lot of people in the space who I've argued with
influence is power.
Role. People like Sam Cedar, people like Jimmy Dore, who I sometimes agree with and sometimes I don't. I don't spend my time. And it's frustrating, I got to say, when you exercise some restraint and don't spend all your time fighting with people, for that to be characterized as having alliance.
Influence is probably one of the most pure forms of power. People listening to what you have to say, believing it, and like altering their behavior and their beliefs based on what you say is probably one of the most pure examples of power. Like, how can you say that podcasters with large audience and political figures with large audiences don't have power?
And secret cabals of it's ridiculous.
Well, I'm not making those criticisms. I usually criticize you for the stuff I think you've said or made points about. I understand that the tribalism here can get out of order from time to time. We obviously different kinds of content, but I'm glad you understand at least that there's a direction to this. Criticizing people in power is fine and good, but sometimes bringing on some dipshit MAGA hat to argue with for 2 hours while calling him every possible word that won't get you banned from YouTube is legitimately a good way of moving over people from the right. It sounds stupid, but especially with the right, oftentimes their allegiances have more to do with conveyed strength than actual arguments. So if you can make somebody look kind of funny and make a couple of good jokes, they'll take you more seriously. And
so
those
what's the
are
difference
attitudes.
Between that? Let me ask you, what's the difference between that and what I'm talking about with alluding to the fact that, you like Marjorie Taylor Greene? Here, what about my pet project over here on the left? Because there are people who said after your Rising appearance, it's wrong to ask, Vaush'S to talk about this because of past statements he's made about women. It's wrong. It's inappropriate, hypocritical. Like you can make any argument that any person is inappropriate to allude to or to bring into a part of a conversation or.
I will say, Brianna Joy Gray is like exhibiting massive amounts of restraint, not just like calling Vaush racist. Like, so many people online will just call Vaush racist when they like debate with him, and that hasn't even been hinted. And you know what? That's respectable. That's respectable.
Respect in any way, or to validate rather in any way.
What is the
difference between you bringing some debating Charlie Kirk? Are
like
you and I validating Charlie Kirk and his beliefs, or that he's a legitimate political figure by engaging with him in debate? Some people think so. Some people think so.
It's funny you bring that up because there was an instance in my conversation with him that I thought kind of spoke to the principle you were talking about showing him up or brain cucking them or whatever term you used. He was talking about.
Sure
you might have used that term. He was talking about the pharmaceutical industries and how they're bad. Fauci, ouchie, whatever. God, And then I said, you can't pull that crap with me. I want to nationalize these industries. You can't, this doesn't work with me. Will you nationalize them? And he dropped the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like a very workable example of what you're saying is good to do. Mm-hmm. You talk about differonces, right? In this particular, and I'll do the Godwin's Law one more time. Okay, I swear, just one. It's a treat, and I'm dropping it forever. I read up a lot on the whole Nazis, fall of the Weimar, whatever. There was a strong intellectual weakness on the part of the Stalin-backed communists in Germany at the time. The attitude was, around a lot of them, a tendency to underestimate the Nazis. The idea that this was just like another upsurge of conservatism, a populist conservatism that could be used by them. And they ended up actually being supportive of some of the institutional destruction that was done by the Nazis as they slowly like undid German democracy, because they felt that it was sort of a dismantling of bourgeois democracy. I am very, very, very what's the term? Vigilant, I guess, of tendencies that I see in line with that. Obviously I'm not perfect in what I see.
Nazbol shit.
Like, leans into that.
Nazbol vortex.
I feel confident on this one, but I do have a particular like fucking. Can I say that here? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. What? Okay. I was so good this entire time. I have a thing with that specific subject. And I do think a lot of lefties really underestimated. It was like the Bernie or bust discourse too with Biden and Trump. And so many lefties were like, yeah, Trump and Biden are two sides of the same coin. They don't understand. A lot of them just don't understand. Bourgeois democracy may be a killer, but it is infinitely better than what we could be living under. And I think that leftism can only really even have a chance at making its arguments if we exist in a system that's not
under liberalism
in the way that the MAGA.
I mean, Bernie blew up during Obama's presidency, didn't he? Like, Bernie really became a person who people were paying attention to and hearing about during Obama's presidency, not during a Republican's presidency, during Obama's, a Democrat. People were seeing what it was like to live under a Democrat and wanted more left.
Your crowd probably would the first chance they got. I mean, God, can you imagine if Barr started putting out insurrection charges on all the BLM protesters? It would have been over for democracy in this country. Thank God he got ousted when he did. So that's a bugbear for me. But it's not born of insensitivity or bad faith tendencies on my part. These are sincere things I care about.
So I understand your argument. Yours, it's the mainstream argument. It's the mainstream Democratic liberal argument. It is, in fact, the vote blue no matter who argument, right?
It absolutely is, yeah.
But wait a minute. I honestly don't feel like you understand my argument. With respect.
That was part 1 of a 2.3-hour interview. Part 2 will drop on Monday. You can access it by becoming a subscriber at patreon.com.
No! It's like the Grand scene. You guys know in Lord of the Rings, the Return to the King, when you got the extended edition DVD version, you would get to the halfway point of the movie where Grand gets rolled out, and then the DVD would end, and you would have to take out the part 1 DVD and put in the part 2 DVD so you could watch the other half of Return of the King extended edition. That is what has just happened to us right now. We just got granded. We've been granded, chat. We got granded by Brianna Joy Gray. Part 2 is already on YouTube. We're not watching that. I'm sorry. As a matter of fact, I think this is where we're going to wrap up. I really don't know what else to say here other than, good God, was that frustrating to watch. I know for a fact that if I ever do an interview with this woman or a debate with her, to do my research beforehand to make sure I've got, like, all the receipts on hand so she can't wiggle her way out of anything. Anyway, yeah, guys, thank you for watching.